Bem-vindo!
And aloha! In this video, we share about our D7 visa and SEF application experience and talk about what is the Portugal D7 visa and who is VSF Global. We also talk about the checklist of items that we need to bring along with our application and share our challenges in the process. And we also share a glimpse of our fun road trip to San Francisco for a D7 visa application meeting.
But getting the D7 visa is only half of the process. So we talk about who is SEF, getting your Portugal temporary residence card, and what we would have done differently. Finally, we also share a glimpse into our trips to Lisbon and Portimão for our SEF meetings and some of the things that we did while we were there.
VSF Global manages the administrative and non-judgmental tasks related to visa, passport, and consular services for its client governments. Portugal is one of many countries that outsources these tasks to them so that the Portuguese consulate can focus on the critical task of assessment. When applying for a visa, it is important to note the areas of jurisdiction in order to make an appointment and process your visa application at the proper location. In our case, at the time of application, we were residing in California, and so we fell under the consular jurisdiction of Portugal in San Francisco and had to apply and process our visa application through the VSF Global location in San Francisco. The other consular jurisdictions of Portugal are in New York and Washington, D.C., so it is important to apply and process your application through the respective VSF Global location. Here is the URL for VSF Global in order to apply from within the USA for a residency visa in Portugal. The process flow is relatively simple, but it is important to note that there are a couple steps that can be done in parallel in order to reduce the overall process time. This is one of the things we would have done differently instead of doing everything sequentially. We first identify the visa type we're applying for. In our case, we applied for the passive income long-term residency. Then we downloaded the application, filled it out, and gathered all the items on the D7 visa checklist. If we were to do it again, in parallel, we would book an appointment and pay the required fees online. We did not realize how backed up VSF Global was on appointments, and so the first available was 8 weeks out from the time we clicked the link to book. If it looked like we would not be able to gather everything on the checklist in time, we could have canceled and rescheduled up to 48 hours before our appointment. Next, we attended our scheduled appointment, bringing our application and all the documentation from the D7 checklist. And finally, expect that things won't go as quickly as you planned. If we were to do it again, we would add a month on to anything VSF Global says. Portugal's visas. Beginning with the tourist visa, we were pretty naive when we were dreaming of traveling the world and in particular Europe. We thought that on our USA passport, we would travel to France and live there for 3 months, then travel to Italy and live there another 3 months, then on to Spain and Portugal, and thought that as long as we didn't overstay our tourist status in a particular country, we were all good. Well, there is something called the Schengen area, which pretty much includes most of Europe and Scandinavia, and the travel rule is such that you can only be in the Schengen area for up to 90 days on a travel visa, but then must leave the Schengen area for 90 days before allowed to return. There are currently 27 countries that comprise the Schengen area, and you can check this on the web for the latest, as there are some other countries pending. There was something called a golden visa, which was a popular investment visa, but at the time of the making of this video, the Portuguese government formally announced it was discontinuing the golden visa, as were many other European countries. The long-term stay residency visa was the option we chose so that we could apply for and acquire a residency permit that can be renewed for up to 5 years. With the Portugal residency permit, we would not be restricted by the Schengen area rules of travel and be able to travel Europe freely as long as we met the requirements of residency in Portugal. The Portugal D7 checklist. The first thing we needed was a Portuguese NIF number, which essentially is your tax ID and somewhat analogous to your social security number in the USA. Once you have your NIF number, you can then open a Portuguese bank account. We used a service called Border.io to help us with these things, and that saved us a lot of time and effort, which freed us up to focus on other critical items on the checklist. We placed their link in the description below. The most challenging item on the checklist was to show proof that we had a place to stay for 12 months minimum. This meant either a 12-month lease agreement on a property that was officially registered with the Portuguese tax authority, Finanças, or documents showing that we'd purchased a property which would be our place of residence in Portugal. As we shared in our last video, there were only 3 places that were open to considering a 12-month lease in the Algarve, and only one ended up being suitable once we could see the property in person. Take note, in order to secure a property, you may have to start payments on a lease even though you haven't received your D7 visa yet. We know of others who paid for months even before coming, so we feel very fortunate to have only paid for 6 weeks of our lease before moving to Portugal. Another challenging item we ran into was related to the Portugal medical insurance. It wasn't that we couldn't find medical insurance to cover us in Portugal, but many of the well-known global companies had restrictions on how far in advance you could purchase a policy whose activation date was far in the future. We didn't want to pay for a policy that we won't be using for a few months, and it is challenging trying to purchase and activate a policy on a moving target date, which was dependent on when we would be granted our D7 visa. In the end, we were able to set up and purchase a policy through our Portuguese bank and have it set up as auto pay, activating and ending up paying for only 6 weeks of policy coverage before we even landed in Portugal. The signed personal statement for immigrating we wrote in the form of a cover letter. That was the top sheet of all the documents on the D7 checklist. We stated our names and what our professions were, educational degrees, hobbies, and why we wanted to move to the beautiful country of Portugal. We cited we were interested in learning the language and culture and integrating into the community to which we were moving. We provide a link in the description below of the letter to be filled out and signed, giving SEF permission to obtain your criminal record in Portugal. Most of the items on the checklist are straightforward, but I'll put the link down below where we requested our FBI background identity check. We paid online and we opted to do electronic fingerprints at our local post office where they provided that service. Finally, since we were applying for the passive income long-term residency visa, we showed documentation of passive income. Examples could be recurring income from investments, rental property, pensions, or annuities. It is unfortunate, however, that we did not make an appointment with VFS Global till after we came back from our scouting trip with a secured lease in hand. VSF Global was so backlogged we had to wait nearly 2 months for the first available appointment. But finally September rolled around, and since our appointment was on a Monday, we took a road trip up to San Francisco for the weekend. We took in the sights of Fisherman's Wharf and Alcatraz Island, explored Telegraph Hill and Little Italy, and walked around the iconic ferry building with views of the Oakland Bay Bridge. We rode cable cars and trolleys, and enjoyed coffee and pastries and local seafood until it was time for our visa application meeting.
Today's the day. Here we are. In 30 minutes we have our interview with VFS Global for our long-term visa. We're nervous, we're anxious, we did the best we could, and we're very nervous because this morning we still didn't have our health insurance policy. At the last minute this morning, our banker sent over the policy and we had the front desk print it out. So I think we're good to go. Go time in 30 minutes. So see you on the other side.
When we checked in with the guard at VSF Global, he asked if we had our cashier's check with us. We kind of looked at each other like, no, we don't have a cashier's check with us. So I guess that was a part of the website to be careful of. Just check that, for that, we missed that. And so for us, we learned that we needed to bring a cashier's check with us, money order made out to the Consulate General of Portugal. So we were in a dilemma. We had our appointment, we were in, we were waiting our turn. It was almost getting close to our time to sit down with the representative and to have all of our paperwork checked over, and we did not have the form of payment that we needed. The lady who was at least helping us initially, she said I could go down to the post office, which was just down the street, and get a cashier's check. And so I took off running down the street, seeing if I could get the cashier's check or the money order. And took my turn at the post office and found out that I would not be able to, because they also required a kind of payment that I didn't bring along with me. They don't do electronics or credit cards. They want either cash on hand or some other payment, and I didn't have it. So I needed to look for an alternative. So thankfully there was a bank where we have an account also in the area, not too far, a couple blocks away. So I hurriedly ran there and was able to work with a representative and finally get the check that we needed to be able to bring back to VSF Global. Unfortunately, it was already past their 10 o'clock appointment. So I ran as best I could to get there and to see what would happen.
Fortunately, VSF Global was running behind. Terry got back at 10:20 a.m. and our appointment was at 10 a.m. So I was really sweating bullets waiting, wondering what would happen if we started our meeting and she wasn't there, and we didn't have the payment for the Consul General. But as it were, everything kind of worked out because VSF Global was running way behind, and even after Terry got back, it was still another 20 minutes before they called our number. So the meeting itself went smoothly, and we were told it was taking 6 to 8 weeks to process our applications, and it would be kind of close to the time that we told them that we had booked flights to Lisbon. So anyway, after a meeting, we went home and we waited and waited and waited. And as it neared the 2-month mark, and granted, they said 6 to 8 weeks, we're getting nervous. And so that I didn't have to pay a penalty, I went ahead and pushed our flights out yet another month. And we waited and waited. And again, come the 3-month mark, I said, honey, we're gonna have to make a decision here. Maybe we'll have to push our flights out yet another month into January, when later that morning, the doorbell rang and it was FedEx. And FedEx delivered a packet. Terry was at work. I opened it up and it had her passport and G7 visa. I'm looking at this packet. I go, well, where's mine? I mean, great, she can go, but I can't go. And it wasn't 2 hours later that the doorbell rang again, and a different FedEx guy makes the delivery, and in that packet it had my G7 visa, passport, so we're set to go. So we're both excited and yet stressed at the same time, because we had really dialed back emptying out the rest of our house, thinking that I'd have to push it out another month into January, and now we suddenly had 12 days until our flight to finish emptying out our house, finish packing, making last arrangements to be able to make this move to Portugal. As it were, we finished emptying out the house in 12 days. We're able to make last minute arrangements. The tenants that we had lined up were really happy that we had gotten our visa and were moving out, because they've been wanting to move in even a month before. And we left the keys with the property manager, and Terry's sister was able to take us to the airport. So on December 14th, we finally boarded our flights to Lisbon and landed in Lisbon on December 15th.
Bienvenido, welcome to Portugal. Our first day in Portugal, we landed, collected our baggage, made it through passport control. No problems. Let's see how it goes at the car rental place.
Well, we had to upgrade our rental car because our luggage wouldn't fit, but made the 3-hour drive from Lisbon to Lagos safely. A couple days after we received our D7 visa, we created our online accounts and saw that SEF had already scheduled us to meet with them, but it wouldn't be until April. So in the meanwhile, we watched sunrises and sunsets, got more stuff for our furnished apartment, did grocery shopping, and experienced our town's Christmas village, carnival in the small town of Audiger close by, and the pro cycling stage that came through town.
Finally, April rolled around and it was time to meet with SEF. But first, who is SEF? SEF is the Portuguese Immigration and Border Service Agency. SEF is responsible for the documentation of aliens and foreigners in Portugal. SEF is also responsible for issuing residence permits and extending visas to foreign nationals in Portugal. Once you have obtained the D7 visa sticker on your passport, you have 120 days to apply for and be granted a temporary residency permit in Portugal. However, during the time frame we applied for our D7 visa, appointments with SEF were automatically assigned. As we prepared for our SEF appointment, we used the website shown. On that website, we navigated to the section Applying for Residence in Portugal, and then to the section for Living in Portugal and Family Reunification. The particular option we then selected was Article 77, Paragraph 1, Residence Permit, General Regime. This page listed all the items and documents we would need to bring to our appointment. It also provided a link to the form that we needed to include with our documents. This is referred to as the standard form. Here is a list of the items we were required to bring. However, please refer to the official website mentioned earlier for the most up-to-date information. In general, we were required to bring documents to show, first of all, we were in Portugal legally and had authorization to apply for temporary residency. These were our passports and D7 visa stamp. Second, we had sufficient means of supporting ourselves, as evidenced by our Portuguese bank statements and statements showing our passive income. Third, we had living accommodations. For us, this was evidenced by our rental agreement. Fourth, we had registered with the tax authority and had obtained a NIF. Fifth, we had personal health insurance in Portugal. Along with these documents, we brought the completed standard form we had printed from the SEF website. We waited to sign the form in the presence of the SEF representative working with us.
We took the Flixbus from Lagos to Lisbon Orient and then took the metro to the Rocio stop. When we exited the metro, we came out onto the Praça Dom Pedro IV. It was magical, and the My Story Hotel Rocio where we were staying was right on the Praça. We took in the views from Miradouro de São Pedro de Alcântara and explored Castelo de São Jorge and surrounds with views of the iconic Ponte 25 de Abril. We enjoyed a variety of architecture around the city and certainly enjoyed sampling the many food options that were available, even though we visited Amarino multiple times for gelato and sorbet.
Well, the day of our SEF meeting rolled around and my appointment was at 9:30 in the morning and Terry's was set up at 10 a.m. in the morning. And you might be asking, why didn't they process us as a couple? Well, this is very common. Many families will end up having their SEF appointment at a different time, different location, and a different day. So in the end, we're very fortunate that we're at the same place, same day, and only within 30 minutes of each other. So anyway, we took the metro from Rocio, a couple stops up to Interdent, walked about a block from there, and we're so intimidated because we heard people speaking Portuguese, and the line was all the way to the entrance of the building. So intimidated, we forgot to take a selfie in front of the building. So we'll just kind of describe our experience. When we got to the entrance of the building, there was a line that went up probably 16 to 20 stairs, and at the top of those stairs was a uniformed immigration officer, kind of like a security guard, and he was acting as a triage for the ticket numbering machine. So when we finally was our turn, we explained to him that we had an appointment, and fortunately he found us on the clipboard we had a valid appointment, and so he gave us a ticket from the machine according to our category. So we got to go inside the waiting room and waited, and it's kind of like sitting at the DMV. They got a bunch of monitors up on the ceiling, and you just wait for your letter / number to come up. And at that point, about 30 minutes later, our number came up, and we went to the triage room where there's a number of windows, and went to our particular window, wherein the woman working that particular window had looked at our documents, and everything seemed to be in order. She said, "Oh, these documents you don't need, these are the only ones you need." And she gave us yet another ticket with a number on it, and we went upstairs. She sent us to a room upstairs where we waited until our number was called. And when our number was called, a woman helped us for about an hour, and in that hour's time she asked a number of questions, looked through our documents, and finally we got to the part where she took our biometrics, which include our photos and electronic fingerprints, and sent us away with official documents that had our pictures on them, had our address, and an official stamp on it. And so we're really happy, mission accomplished, because this served as our temporary paperwork for our residency card until they're able to send a laminated one in the mail. But it's not over, because when we went to get the mail about a month later, we opened up the letters from SEF, and they had our laminated cards in there, and we're looking at all the details on it, and everything matched up with what was on the paperwork, but the city was completely different. And we're going, how can this be when the documents that were printed off the computer shows our city of Lagos, yet on the back of the cards it has all our address and everything, but it has a totally different city. So on the cover letter that came with these cards, it basically said that you have 20 days if you find an error on the card to return the cards and to get the errors taken care of. So we went down to the local camera because we weren't sure how to do that, and the camera is our city hall, and there is a SEF officer there who answers questions, and she said we needed to go to the SEF office in Portimão. We didn't need to go all the way back up to Lisbon, and to go to the security guard there and tell him that you have 20 days to return these cards and that you need to get this error corrected. So we took her advice, and we took the bus from Lagos to Portimão, and we went to the SEF building there. And again, it was pretty intimidating, even worse so, because there's just a mass of people outside the door, no orderly queue, and the security guard / immigration officer, he'd open the door and everyone would rush the door, and he'd pick somebody to talk to, and he would either turn them away or he would let them in. So fortunately, we're able to continue to move our way up in the crowd, and when it got to our turn, I explained to him the best I could in Portuguese that there's an error on our cards, and I showed him the documents they gave us in Lisbon, and I showed him the cards, and then he asked to see some other paperwork that we happen to bring with us, and he let us in. So the funny thing is that here we all are, the masses standing out in the sun, and when you get let in, there's this huge waiting room. It's air conditioned. It's air conditioned, and just a couple people attending at the windows to the people that he lets in. So nonetheless, we waited about 5 minutes. He went over and talked to one of the women and supervisors at the desks, and eventually they called us over. So again, after about 30 minutes to an hour of trying to get this straightened out, because they're scratching their heads, how could this happen? It truly was mission accomplished. They sent us away with new documents that served as our temporary residency, with the correct address, with our photos on it, with a new official stamp, and everything looked corrected just like before. And then finally another 3 weeks went by, would you say?
3 weeks.
And we received our envelopes, and this time when we opened up the cards, everything matched. So hooray.
Yes, finally.
Finally got our residence cards.
Yes.
So the moral of the story is, and you hear this a lot in different blogs, is you have to be patient. The system's not perfect here. You scratch your head many times on why things happen the way they do. But if you're willing to just kind of go with it and not have total meltdowns like sometimes I do, you know, you'll get eventually what you need. So with that, we finally said, let's celebrate, and took the time, since we're in Portimão, to kind of tour around, and hopefully you'll enjoy some of the sites that we share with you. Well, that's a wrap. We hope you enjoyed tagging along with us as we shared our experience of getting our D7 visa and our residency here in Portugal, and enjoyed some of the fun we had along the way visiting San Francisco, Lisbon, and Portimão. So until next time,
Até próxima!
and aloha!